There it is. He timed it right.
Counting to explode with the left. Oh, and that right, but Davis took off some of the steam of the punch, but still.
Welcome to the motherfucking lady. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The ongoing debate as to whether or not Bam Rodriguez is free to go and exit from his existing Matchroom deal. Eddie Hearn responded to Robert Garcia's comments on Bam, saying, "We had an exclusive negotiation period where he can't talk with anybody else before he talks to someone else to get the offer that he's happy with to represent to us. Our first proposal was in early January. We don't have to make him an offer. It has absolutely no bearing on the situation at all, and Matchroom's right to match whatever offers are made to him. Once that exclusive period runs out, he's then free to talk to other people. That's what he did. He had an offer that he said, this is an offer we're happy with. Garcia texted me and he said in writing, we want to stay with you. All you have to do is match this offer and we're moving forward with Matchroom. We matched the offer. Contractually, that's all we have to do. What speaks to Robert Garcia's recent comments that after Bam entered free agency, they didn't hear from Matchroom until 30 days or something to that effect. What Eddie is essentially saying is it doesn't matter because Matchroom retained their matching rights, and upon receiving word of an offer made to Bam, they matched that offer. So the contract is binding and still stands. This is turning into a bona fide case of he said, she said, but what is clear to me is that Robert wants to take Bam over there, over to Zuffa. And in my previous video, we talked about why, from the Bam Rodriguez perspective, how would he stand to benefit from migrating from DAZN over to Paramount Plus, which is comparatively a much bigger platform. We talked about how that might benefit Bam, but how might that also benefit Robert, who seems to have something going on with the people over there at Zuffa. It was actually Drew, friend of the channel and longtime panelist, who pointed out that Robert Garcia may be getting a commission for every single one of these fighters that he funnels over to Zuffa. Fighters who weren't doing very much to begin with, some of them. According to Robert, young fighters who were never with a major promotional outfit to begin with, taken over to Zuffa who can find use for them. What does he get for funneling a Bam Rodriguez over there? A top fighter, a world champion, who actually did have a major promotional outfit behind him. What does the commission look like for Robert if he brings them a guy like that? The moral of the story, if it seems like Robert wants to take Bam from Matchroom over to Zuffa, it's because he does, likely because there's something in it for him also. Now, that doesn't mean anything nefarious, that Robert is trying to screw over Eddie or screw over Bam. This is boxing, and everybody's trying to better deal everybody at all times. It's just the way it is. Ultimately, the truth of it will come out in the wash as to whether or not Bam is actually free to go to Zuffa. One guy that just did, Edwin De Los Santos, you may be familiar with that name. That's the same Edwin De Los Santos that used to be handled by Samson Lukowicz. He broke away from Samson upon the collapse of what was supposed to be the Keyshawn Davis fight, and I vaguely recall him going to Jay Prince. I remember Jay Prince was supposed to be the one handling him after that. Did Jay Prince just funnel Edwin De Los Santos to Zuffa for a nice commission like the ones that Robert has been getting for all the fighters he's taken over there? I told you guys weeks ago that because Zuffa's got money and because they've got fight dates, which is the lifeblood of the sport, that's what moves it, you're going to see a lot of familiar people pair up with Zuffa, not just fighters. I told you guys this weeks ago. Fixtures in the sport, some managers and some trainers, maybe even a few promoters. You see Tom Loeffler, he took Sergey Boachuk over there. Who else is he going to take over there? He took Callum Walsh over there. Those are two fighters that he was very much invested in. He's given them to Zuffa. You're going to see more of this from more managers, from more promoters in the sport at a time where PBC doesn't have any fight dates. Top Rank has yet to land on their feet after losing ESPN as a partner. No fight dates there, not yet. Fighters and their managers, to survive and keep their heads above water, have got to go where the fight dates are, and right now, that's Zuffa. But that also begs the question, what are they signing up for? What exactly does a Zuffa contract look like? According to Eric McGracken, a very worthwhile read, here are some of the highlights. The Zuffa boxing contracts are similar in some respects to the contracts used by other major boxing promoters. In other respects, they go further and make Don King's contracts of old look fighter-friendly. If the fighter declines to take a fight that Zuffa offers him, it counts against one of the fights that Zuffa is obliged to offer him that year.
I don't see anything wrong with that. If they offer you a fight and you don't take it, they held up their end of the bargain. The fighter shouldn't be free to waste their fucking time. You see enough of that in regular boxing that it needs correction now. I think that rule makes a lot of sense.
The Zuffa contract further provides that if a fighter has an undercard bout and the main event is postponed or cancelled, Zuffa can pull the fighter's fight down without any payment obligation to the undercard fighter. Other fights given to Zuffa extend to the sale of virtual reality, augmented reality, hyper-reality, artificial intelligence, and enhanced reality games and experiences, as well as motion pictures. Many of these rights extend non-exclusively in perpetuity.
A fighter's likeness and intellectual property is what we're talking about, but you tell me, how much was Sergei Boyachuk's intellectual property worth when he lost to Brandon Adams for the second time? How much was Rayo's worth when he lost to Gary Antoine Russell? You're talking about these fighters as intellectual property as if it's some sort of a fucking gold mine.
The contract requires that fighters wear only equipment and the uniform approved by Zuffa during fights, as well as pre-bout and post-bout events. Zuffa even gets a range of rights relating to any tattoos that the fighter may have on his body.
That sounds a lot worse than it is, when in the real world there are plenty of employers that have rules and stipulations regarding their employees' tattoos, whether or not they can even show them.
The fighter must arrive on site for his bouts at a time designated by Zuffa, which can be as much as 8 days before the bout, and depart the lodging provided by Zuffa prior to the designated checkout. Time on the day after the fight.
Sounds like Zuffa's keeping a tight ship, a tight schedule, and I don't see anything wrong with that because boxing has been the wild, wild west up until this point, and it needs structure, regulation.
If a fighter is offered a bout against an opponent designated by Zuffa and does not accept the bout because the fighter is unwilling or unreasonably refuses to compete for any reason whatsoever, Zuffa may, at its election, for each such declination, extend the contract term.
I don't see anything wrong with that either. They're holding up their end of the bargain by offering you fights. If you reject them, you don't get to sit out waiting out the contract. You don't get to waste people's time.
If the fighter is a Zuffa boxing champion at the end of the term shall automatically be extended for 1 year or until the fighter has participated in 3 or more Zuffa boxing bouts, whichever eventually occurs first.
Cry me a river, buddy. Regular boxing contracts have stipulations like that, to where if a fighter wins a world title, the promotional outfit gets to keep them on board for a designated amount of time or a designated number of fights. That's normal.
The Zuffa boxing contract provides in part, to the maximum extent permitted by applicable law, the parties agree that no claims may be initiated or maintained on a class action, collective action, or representative action basis, either in court or arbitration.
Look at them, they're so evil for covering their own ass.
The contract precludes the fighter from seeking any consequential, incidental, or punitive damages from Zuffa, nor shall the fighter have the right to seek an injunction or other equitable relief.
Look at them, they're so evil for covering their own ass.
It requires that the fighter relinquish the right to sue Zuffa in state or federal court and submit any claim he may have against Zuffa to binding arbitration in Clark County, Nevada.
That essentially means they would like to resolve any issues a fighter might have with the promotion internally. We've seen enough frivolous lawsuits that I don't see anything wrong with that stipulation or Zuffa as a promoter covering their own ass. What do you expect them to do?
In the event that either side engages counsel in connection with enforcement or interpretation of the contract, the prevailing party would be entitled to recover attorney's fees and costs from the other party, regardless of whether or not a legal action is filed. The contract also states, fighters additionally agree that if fighter chooses to undertake any training activities or preparation for bouts, such activities and or preparation for bouts will not take place in California.
So the first thing I want to say about this Zuffa contract and all of its various bullet points is I don't think every boxer walking into a Zuffa deal would sign on for the same deal. Say, not Jayo Pataya, not Bam Rodriguez, not any of the big-name fighters.
I believe that if this is a standard contract at Zuffa, it's for a certain standard of fighter, likely not the kind of fighter that needs to worry about his intellectual property.
Say an Edwin De Los Santos? Because what exactly was his intellectual property worth? What money was he making from that?
That you need to be so fucking worried about signing it over to Zuffa. Here's the reality of it. You don't have to sign to Zuffa. You don't have to go to them. You can take your chances out there in the open market, where neither the PBC or Top Rank have all that many fight dates.
And even if they did, do you think any of them were going to bust their budget promoting you?
You can take your chances in the open market. You're not obligated to box under the Zuffa banner. But if some fighters are choosing to, it's because Zuffa is still a better alternative to the nothing they've been making. And if that something you now stand to gain with Zuffa comes with strings attached and structure, well, that's what boxing needs. Regulation and structure. Because we've been doing it the other way long enough that no broadcasters wanted to invest in boxing.
Paramount does, so long as they do things a certain way. They did it the PBC way for a number of years. That saw them leave the sport. And that's the part that Eric McGracken doesn't address. While he's criticizing what Zuffa is doing,
Paramount was already in this sport via Showtime Boxing. And they let them do things their way, burning through cash, overpaying fighters, not delivering metrics, not drawing new eyes to the platform, and sticking every highfalutin fighter's fights behind a paywall to satisfy their financial demands that they never should have been demanding to begin with, because you're not worth what you're asking for.
they already did it the other way, Eric.
You can reverse engineer all the things you shouldn't do based on what they did do, because what they did didn't fucking work. So what's it supposed to be? That the fighters get to do whatever they want and demand whatever they want, even though it's not their money keeping the lights on?
Oh, no, but it's their blood, it's their sweat and their tears.
So parting the fuck out of me. You can keep it. They'll just use somebody else's, because a lot of people don't want to say this. I will. The fighters are not indispensable.
They're expendable, easily replaced.
It's reality. A fighter that may pass for a hot button topic today, tomorrow is yesterday's news.
It's reality.
And you can't bring the whole goddamn industry down, the whole house down, catering to the fighters, just the fighters, and whatever the fighters want, if it doesn't make for a sustainable business. And there's nothing sustainable about how things have been. That's why all the networks pulled out.
Eric doesn't talk about that. How are you supposed to do boxing with no network money?
Let's just moan about a standard Zuffa contract and how it doesn't allow the fighters to waste everybody's time like they've been wasting everybody's time, because that seems to be your problem with it.
So don't sign to Zuffa. Take your chances somewhere else.
It's a free country.
Says, why do you hate on Tank so much? I don't really hate on Tank for real. I gave him 1,000% credit on his boxing ability, but I just asked a couple things is why he's not fighting the best, which is the topic of conversation with most people. You know, why is he wearing purses and doing a little gay shit? You know what I'm saying? That's all. That's it. If you call that hating, you know what I'm saying? And hating is when I'm just, hey, how can I hate on him if he wearing a purse? You believe in purses? You know what I'm saying? You believe in doing gay shit? You know what I'm saying? If that's on you, and like they say, when it's somebody gay, and ain't nothing wrong with that.
What is the point and purpose in addressing the sexual orientation of your typical Gervonta Davis fan?
And Gervonta Davis' sexual orientation as well.
It's because they see all the fruity shit he does. You know, he comes out wearing a pink mink, he's wearing a purse, he's painting his nails, and that's almost like a bat signal to these guys that, hey!
Wants to play hide the peanut butter.
I've long maintained that your typical Gervonta Davis fan does not watch Gervonta Davis's fights for the same reason that me and you might be watching fights. Boxing matches involving boxers. They watch him because they want to have sex with him. Yeah. They want to fuck him or be fucked by him. Yeah. Which is their prerogative. Far be it from me to dictate to anyone else why they should watch a boxer or a boxing match, but you have to understand that these separate factions of fans are watching the same sport for different reasons. And with Gervonta's fans, as soon as you're critical of him, they say you're hating.
When you say that he never fought the best at any weight that he's ever fought, didn't fight the best at 130, at 135, didn't fight the best at 140, that is an objective criticism.
But they call it hating, because they look at him through rose-tinted lenses, getting mad at us because we don't.
Getting mad at Bernie.
When Gervonta has no track record of fighting the best fighters at any weight that he's ever fought. So when Bernie says it, he's just telling the truth. But it doesn't sound like the truth to them because they're watching this same sport that we are for different reasons.
To them, telling the truth sounds like hating.
It's the earmark of this younger generation that doesn't want to deal with reality. But any dissent from reality is madness. By definition.
Any dissent, any deviation.
So what can you expect from a generation that thinks their feelings matter more than the facts and they can, in effect, identify as whatever they wish without any identifiable qualities?
I identify as a turkey sandwich.
And I identify as a coconut.
Gervonta should identify as a fruit, because that's what he is, and so are his fans. Remember when that veteran content creator, Boxing Ego, wrote what was tantamount to a grocery list of things he loves about Gervonta Davis, listing his fashion sense and leg tattoos?
What about that constitutes a boxing conversation about a boxing match in boxes? Does this strike you as the kind of thing your typical boxing fan concerns themselves with?
Obviously not.
What you like about Gervonta Davis has very little to do with his boxing. And that is, after all, your prerogative, which wouldn't be so bad if you didn't pretend that you were running a boxing channel talking about boxing matches when all you really want is for Gervonta to stick his hot dog in your bun. What that essentially means is that a grown man in the same age group as me paid the $8 or $9 for a subscription to get that blue tick on Twitter so he can write all that shit with both ankles in the air.
You hoping he takes you to the prom?
Now, these behaviors and what they resemble are tantamount to a high school crush.
I saw him in math class today.
What the fuck? Yeah. And I suppose it doesn't really matter anyway because Gervonta Davis's boxing career, not that you guys care all that much about boxing because you don't, may come to an end very soon. I see a lot of people talking about this guy like U.S. Marshals aren't actively looking for him right now, like there isn't a warrant out for his arrest in connection with yet another domestic assault.
The other day, somebody asked Shakur Stevenson about him. Ahead of a fight that he's about to actually have, you guys keep asking him about a fight that'll never happen.
A fight that by now all of you should know will never happen. The other day I saw Isaac Cruz has made a rematch with Gervonta Davis a priority.
His top priority.
Well, color me surprised, because it's not like he's been saying that same shit for the last 4 years.
Listen, it's not capital murder. It's not a homicide case. It's not a RICO case. So I don't imagine Gervonta's got to do all that much time. But he may have to do enough that his boxing career is over by the time he gets out. The guy's in his mid-30s. He already had a wavering commitment to the sport of boxing and no intention of fighting Shakur, Devin, Tio, or any of his contemporaries. None of that was going to happen.
And now none of it is going to. Least of all when there's an active warrant out for his arrest that Bernie the Boxer doesn't need to keep addressing these idiots, these guys, because shortly, Gervonta Davis will be out of the sport. And so will they. They're going to go with him.
Petition for a marriage license so they can give him conjugal visits.
These are not boxing fans, and they never were, so we don't need to keep talking about boxing with them.